Hey everyone, welcome back to another video here on DarkSec. I am Dark, and today we're going to be taking a look at the challenge room Lazy Admin on TryHackMe. This is an easy Linux machine to practice your skills. This is a machine that's been on the website for a long time now, but it's really popular because it's a great beginner machine that even if you're coming back to this and you just want some nice practice, a nice little dip into the pen testing pool, so to speak, this box is really great practice for that. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So the first thing you'll need to do is join the room. I've gone ahead and already done that. However, you'll also want to deploy both the attack box if you're going to be using that, as well as the machine itself. In this case, I've gone ahead and done that. Since this is a challenge room and there's not exactly a lot here for us to work with, I'm actually going to be moving over to another tab which has the attack box full screen. Let's go ahead and do that right now. So first things first, as with every single challenge box or every single box we want to pen test, we're going to start off by scanning it. In this case, I've gone ahead and already done that with this command nmap-sv to get some service versions, and then I have it saved as an nmap file in the current working directory with the name of lazyadmin.nmap. So I've gone ahead and already done that. Even then, it's very quick, especially if you're using the attack box because it's on the exact same network as the box you're attacking. And we can go and take a look at that scan now. So here we can see the output of the scan. It's not too exciting. In this case, we have, it looks like 2 ports open. We have 22, which is SSH, which is very rare to actually be the one that we're going to be targeting. It's just something that it's very common to see on web servers. And then we have port 80. Traditionally, in a production environment, you're going to see port 443 instead of 80. But otherwise, this is very stereotypical Linux web server box, as we can see from the Apache web server running here. Let's go ahead, and if we hop over to the browser here, we can see what exactly is living on port 80. And it seems to just be a default Apache 2 landing page. Nothing too crazy there. So that being said, since we're not finding anything here, next we want to move into using GoBuster to see if we can find something hidden, potentially a little bit deeper in the web server. We're going to go and move over to another tmux tab here, and here we can see that I've gone ahead and completed that with the command GoBuster, putting it in dir mode with the URL of my box IP. Make sure that this one is yours, otherwise this won't work for you. And then I use the directory list 2.3 medium with just GoBuster default settings otherwise. I've gone ahead and already let that completed, and I found 2 directories. It looks like one that's really of interest here, that content, especially since it's giving us a 301. The server status with that 403, we're not authorized to see that, so can't do anything with that. Now, if we go to the web server again in our browser and take a look at that content directory, we can find that we have a landing page for a CMS that seems to be named Sweet Rice. So CMSs are very common targets, especially for OCP style boxes, and this box appears to be no different. So we have a basic starting point of information here. We know we're working with the Sweet Rice CMS. Now let's go ahead, we're going to jump over to ExploitDB, and let's see if we can actually find something that this is vulnerable to. Doesn't appear that we have an actual version here, but we can type in this name and see if we have anything we can work with. So going into ExploitDB, and let me make this just a little bit bigger, typing in just Sweet Rice will get us quite a few interesting options here. So it looks like this is a CMS that's had a little bit of a troubled history, starting with remote file inclusion when it wasn't even the 1.0 version. That's rough. However, we can see that we have a lot to work with here. Through the process of trial and error, and this is something that, especially since we don't have a version number, this is one of those things that's worthwhile to look into and just kind of play around with. Eventually, you're going to end up on the backup disclosure issue 1 here at the top. And if we go ahead and click into that, this is a very interesting vulnerability. It's one of the very simple, more simple things that you're going to find on ExploitDB. In this case, we can see that we have a proof of concept that says you can access all the Mysql Backup data and download them from this directory. We have localhost to the actual IP of the CMS here, and then INC, and then Mysql Backup, which is interesting. if we can get this backup, in theory, we should be able to potentially get passwords for being able to authenticate to maybe the MySQL database, or maybe just log into the web app proper. So let's go ahead. We can take this. I'll copy that onto my clipboard, and we can go into back here. Actually, it's INC and then MySQL Backup. Let's see what it was. MySQL _backup. Let's see if we can find it in here. We can actually just go here. So it looks like we're in this content directory. Let's try just going straight to INC and then / MySQL _backup and see if that's on here. And it doesn't look like it is. However, we know that the CMS was living in a subdirectory, which was the content directory. So maybe if we add that on here at the beginning, looks like there we go. So we can see, sure enough, this version is presumably 1.51 or 0.1, and it looks like we have the MySQL backup ready and available for us to download. I've gone ahead and already done that just for the sake of time. This does take a hot moment to download just because the web server is a little bit slow, and this is not a small file. If we go up to the downloads, we can go ahead, and I'll just click open file. I've already got this open, so it should open it again. Let me see if I can make this bigger. And it is not going to let me. So here we can see that we have just a .sql file, which appears to be PHP. Nothing too fancy here. However, if we scroll through this file, and this is where grep can be your friend, we can find eventually, when we scroll down to it, we can see some actually useful text here. So we have lazy admin websites, author, and then it looks like we have the keywords description, admin. So it looks like the administrator account is named manager, and then the password is going to be this piece of information. Now, this is a password hash. This is something that we can actually take and go back to our browser and see if we can actually crack this with a website called CrackStation. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So go ahead and copy that to your clipboard. I've gone ahead and already done that. Otherwise, you would be grabbing it just right over here with this clipboard button. And we can go to CrackStation, and I've gone ahead and already pasted that in. You'll click the I'm not a robot to just do the CAPTCHA. However, we can see that it was an MD5 hash, which is something we could have gotten with hash ID anyways. And the password is incredibly strong at password 123. And again, this is fairly straightforward. This is something that you'll pretty commonly find in backups like this. And it's actually pretty common to find backups like this exposed on maybe network shares or other things like that. So keep an eye out for this and be aware. A lot of times these are pretty weak passwords and you can crack them very quickly. So we know our admin account for the actual web app, and we know the password for that account. Let's head back to the TryHackMe attack box and see if we're actually able to log in. So before we can do that, we actually have to find the login window, which is a little tricky. This is actually something that you can find either by doing recursive go busting, or you can just look up the documentation for this specific web app. It's not very complex documentation. It's actually pretty straightforward. And we know that we're out of the content directory, so we just know that we have to prefix everything with that. So once you do a little bit of Googling around, you can find that we go to the web server and then content, and then if we put /as as the directory, we can find that we have our login panel. So pretty straightforward, and you can see it looks like this has its copyright updated, but this is pretty indicative that that's just updating with JavaScript. So it's very likely that this probably has plenty of other problems with it as well. So I've gone ahead and actually logged in another tab. So I'm going to jump back over here. You can see that we have the MySQL backup. And once you log in, you'll be greeted with this lovely Sweet Rice admin panel. And after poking around in here a little bit, you can find that there is an arbitrary file upload where you can just kind of add your own pages. Where if you go to the advertisements link over here, and then I'll middle click that to open it up in a new tab, we can see that we can add in an ad and then just add the code for the ad, which is very interesting. This is something that It looks like it was built with good intentions. However, this allows us to just kind of chuck a backdoor in the web server and get a shell off the machine that way. So what we can go ahead and do, and I've gone ahead and already done this just for the sake of time, is we can grab a reverse shell off of our machine. Let me open up a new tab in Tmux. We can grab that from USR share, web shells, PHP reverse shell. We can go ahead and copy that to our current directory, which I've gone ahead and already done this, so we're going to skip that. And then we can open that up, and we have ourselves a PHP shell. Now, the one thing that we'll have to do is we will have to change these two pieces of information to match up with what we want. So in this case, this is going to be your attack box IP, and I'm glad I didn't already launch this because that is incorrect for mine. Should not have that 0 at the end, and then we need to set the port that we want to send our reverse shell back to. What we can go ahead and do as well before we keep going is I'm going to hop over here and I'll restart this. Is we want to start a Netcat Listener to actually catch our shell once we launch it after putting it in the ad here. So if we go ahead and we use the command rlwrap, now this is something that isn't traditional with Netcat shells, but I'll get into it in a moment. And then Netcat lvnp, so this is listen, this is verbose, so it'll tell us when we have a connection. N is going to be, I forget what N is off the top of my head. It's just something I use out of habit with this, and then P is going to specify the port that we're actually going to listen at. rlwrap is an actual wrapper for this, so Netcat shells by default are kind of not great to work in. If you do Control-C in them, it will just outright kill them. rlwrap gives us the ability to use up arrows in this and go back in our command history. It's really nice. It's just a nice quality of life thing that we can do to make our shells a little bit better. That being said, let's go ahead and launch this, and then we will go back to the PHP reverse shell, and I'll do Control-A and then Control-C to copy that onto my clipboard, and we'll name this shell, and we'll paste in our fun code. And there we go. We should be able to save that. And let's see. Here, give me just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's saved correctly, and we'll be right back. Okay, looks like it did save correctly. So if we go ahead and navigate, and this is something else that we would also find with either recursive go busting or via just poking around at the documentation for this, we can actually find that the advertisements for this are actually stored in a directory within the INC folder. So if we go here, and then we go to content, INC, and then let's see, I believe it's just ads. We should be able to find them here. I don't know if this is going to be listable, and there we go. So we have our shell.php, and once we click on that, that's going to go ahead and run the code, and there we go. We've gone ahead and gained access to this machine. Now if we do ls/home, it looks like we have an IT guy. Let's see, ls-lsa. Let's see if we can home IT guy and see if we can get a flag out of there. Let's see, cat home IT guy user.txt, and there we go. So we're able to get that flag. We can copy that out by highlighting it and then copy, and then if we go over to the clipboard, double click or triple click to select all of it, we can go back to this tab and collect our user flag. Cool. And it should give me my lovely streak. All right, so we've gone ahead, we've gained our user flag, and we are ready to go into privilege escalation. So with privilege escalation, you may notice that we are www-data. Having to escalate from this position is very common. If you are ever going after web servers, it's very common to end up as this user, or I believe IIS has a user specifically on Windows, which I'm sure we'll come across with doing a box on this channel at some point, but for Linux, this is the user that you end up as for the most part. That being said, it's very common to have to privesc off of this, and one of my favorite ways to check for privesc is by using sudo. And sure enough, so we don't have the actual password for our user. However, it looks like we have permissions to run without a password user bin perl on this script home it guy backup.perl. Now that's an interesting one because typically we don't work with Perl. Perl is just a scripting language. It's similar to Python. It's a little bit more distinctive what it's used for, but it's something that is worth being a little bit familiar with, at least the basic syntax that we see in it. So let's go ahead. We can take a look at what that actual file is, since we can run it with sudo powers. So we cat it. That's very straightforward. So we have a shebang up here saying, hey, you need to run this with Perl. And it looks like we're running system command, so sh, so running shell as opposed to bash. And then we're running that on etc copy.sh. And let's take a look at that file. Let's first see if we can actually modify this file, because if we can just modify this file, we'll just have it run a shell for us. If we do lstech lsa home it guy, let's see who owns that file, and it is root. So it looks like root has read and write to it, and everyone else has read, and it looks like execute powers. So interesting. We can't actually write to that. Let's see if and let's go ahead and cat that again. Home it guy backup.pl. Let's see if we can actually modify that etc copy.sh file. So let's do lstech lsa etc copy.sh. I believe this should give us permissions just for that file. And sure enough, it looks like, so this is the everyone part. We have read, write, and execute powers on those, even though it's owned by root. So interesting. That's not great. Let's go ahead and cat. Actually, we don't even care what's in that at this point. We can write to it, and we know that it's going to be running as root, so we can just have it spawn a shell. In this specific case, let me go ahead. I'm going to look up a specific thing. Actually, we can have it send us a reverse shell here in just a second. Let me go ahead and pause and grab my notes for that real quick. All right, and we're back. So we're actually going to do something a little bit more interesting rather than sending ourselves a reverse shell. We're going to use a privilege escalation technique called root bash. This is one that Tiberius covers pretty heavily in his Linux PrivEsc course on Udemy, so I definitely recommend checking that out and checking out the room associated with that on TryHackMe. But with this, we can go ahead and create an SUID version of bash that we just chuck in the temp folder. That way it's gone when the server reboots, easy cleanup, and we can just run it with the -p option to become root whenever we want. It's a great way to, especially if maybe the privilege escalation method that you have is a one-shot or very finicky. This is a great way to be able to actually PrivEsc consistently off of one exploit that you don't have to run it over and over again. With that, we can go ahead and echo this into the etc copy.sh file. That way we can just overwrite it. For this case, typically we don't want to actually overwrite scripts like that because we don't want to be noticed. If we're overwriting scripts, we're going to break things, especially something like that that looks pretty important. Typically we want to just check our stuff at the end, and that way everything still works as normal, and we would just restore it back to normal after we're done with this. Or we could even just copy it out and then restore it back to normal. Or make just a backup of it and then write over this one. Either way, we don't want to be caught, and if we're breaking functionality that's supposed to be as part of the web server, someone's going to have to go and investigate, and then we're going to start getting caught. Quite a bit more important when we're actually going through and doing red teaming as opposed to pen testing, but just something to be aware of. That being said, let's go ahead and echo in our magical root bash command to the etc copy. So we can go ahead and put this as, we'll name it root bash. So we'll copy the bash binary into temp and rename it as root bash, and then we're going to give it an SUID sticky bit with chmod, since this is running as root. And we can echo that into etc copy.sh. And there we go. So now if we do sudo tac-l, again, just double checking that we have the correct path. If we do sudo usr bin perl, and then home it guy backup.pl, we can see that it completes just nice and quietly there. And if we take a look in temp, we can see that we have that wonderful root bash binary that we can run with temp root bash -p. And there we go. This might not look like much, but if we run who am I, we can see that we are now root, and we can go ahead and cat out that wonderful root flag. And there we go. And that's done it. So again, we're abusing the fact that we can create our SUID binary that's just bash, so it runs bash as root whenever we want, creating a very nice way that we can privask whenever we want. Let's go ahead and copy this out, and we'll put this in the flag submission window. If we go back over here, and there we go. That's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions, as always, I will have the DarkSec Discord as well as the TryHackMe official Discord and subreddit linked in the video description below. If you enjoyed this box, please comment, let me know what your favorite part is. Otherwise, until next time, happy hacking!